Hello and welcome to Haul Around the World, presented by Crushing Comics. I'm your host, Crisis with a K, and I'm here in the midst of my collection that I hauled around the world from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where it was assembled, to here in Wellington, New Zealand, where it and I live now. And that means every time I want something new to enter this collection, it too must be hauled around the world, because not too many of these books originate in or really anywhere near New Zealand. So that is the whole reason I have this show. And today's haul is actually just one book, but I'm about to show you two books. But the two books are one book. So why am I here to talk about a single book haul, and why are there two of it? Well, this has something to do with the quality differences in different epic collections and the way they are printed, and I'm going to be doing a blind taste test on these two to see if it's really all that different. But that brings me to kind of an opening point to discuss, which is why do things remain or even get to our collections to begin with? Now, many of you don't have a collection of this size, which I think is a great and healthy thing, and you're just buying the things that interest you. But let's dig into that a second. What makes it interesting? For some of you, it's a certain creator. For some of you, it's a certain character. But a lot of the times, for people who are collecting a certain series or trying to amass, especially books that collect classic material, like these Avengers West Coast epics, you are trying to collect something because it has the right material in it. And I think that so often is why I buy things. I look at this Excalibur omnibus that's on the shelf here, and I almost didn't buy it because it originally was solicited with contents that would have been not what I'd want in an Excalibur omnibus. And right now, the reason I mostly skip a book is not because I'm not interested. I know exactly what I want. Is that the book doesn't collect the right stuff. So for me, that is a big factor about what gets into my collection. If I see the map of a book, especially if it's a book that's not already part of like an epic collection, which I was probably going to buy anyway, and it's not the right map of a book, I'm not going to buy it. But conversely, if I see a book like some of those Son of Satan classics that we were looking at recently in another video, and I'm like, wow, that map is great, I wound up buying a book that I didn't intentionally imagine that I was going to buy. So for me, that's a big driver. But then there's other issues about the book as well, right? The build quality of the book, which we don't get to judge because we're not in a bookstore. I remember being a young kid, and not that young kid, and going to the bookstore was the best thing. Like if we could go to a Borders and hang out every weekend and shop for books and get coffee, my life was made because I loved the picking up of books. And yeah, if a book was heavier or if a book had a cooler cover, if it had a foil emboss or something, that book was more attractive. Of course, now so many of us are buying these books on the internet. Their production is so standardized that that whole concern of what looks great on the shelf doesn't really come into play for us as much anymore, I don't think. I mean, when we look at Marvel Masterworks, we kind of assume that we're all going to get the Marvel Masterwork that matches the Marvel Masterwork that we got the last time we got a Marvel Masterwork. And so when there are differences in quality of something that we're buying, it sticks out to us. But we're not at the bookstore where we get to make that decision. We're getting those books shipped to our home and then seeing the difference. And that brings us back to these epic collections. One of these two, and I'm shuffling them quite thoroughly, so I can't possibly know. One of these two was printed by Quad Graphics. This was a printer that Marvel was using for epic collections that people did not really like the quality. And a lot of people had a lot of things to say. The binding wasn't as good, the paper was thin, it felt floppy, but that was in a vacuum. They had Quad books that they were looking at and saying, I don't like them. But here is a chance. I don't even know who printed the newer one because I don't know which one of these is the newer one. We're going to do a blind taste test for me between these two books and see if I can identify the differences between the two of them and know which one is the Quad book, or if I've been blowing smoke this entire time whenever I pick up a book and go, oh, the paper's nice, it feels smooth, it feels crunchy, or whatever the things I say. Am I full of it or not? Here is the test. You saw me thoroughly shuffle those epic collections, and now I'm going to pick up the one that was on top. I do not know which one was on top, and take a look. The only difference is I was thinking the top of the pages maybe could have a little bit of different coloration because one has been on my shelf for a while. So I'm just going to be really careful not to look at the top of the pages. Everything else I should be able to kind of just judge. So even without looking at it, this paper has a nice feel to it. Let's see how it takes ink. I mean, it's a nice bright white. I do see some show through on the white pages. But it takes color really well. It feels like it's got a decent weight to it. It doesn't have that feeling that sometimes pages have where I go like this and it just feels like it's gonna rip right out of the book. The covers are pretty supple. They actually don't feel very stable. And they actually feel kind of light. And it feels, I'm trying to like do this without looking at the top. I mean, if the binding feels okay, it doesn't feel that wobbly to me. And then just looking through at the printing quality, I would say the printing quality looks solid. The separation of the colors is good. Things are distinct. This is fine. If this arrived as a brand new epic, which I don't know which one it is, I think I would say this is a fine epic collection. So now let's take a look at the other one. Okay, well, the first thing I noticed when I picked up this one is the spine. I don't know how to explain it. When you have a trade paperback bound square and you go like this on the spine, you know, there's no like backed ribbon binding or anything. These pages are just glued down. They're still printed in groups because that's the way printers work, but they're just glued onto the binding. And this is a really square binding that it's glued on, but it should still feel like it has stability even though there's nothing there, as opposed to a hardcover book where the signatures are sewn and then there's a backing panel on that. It shouldn't feel so wobbly, like the spine doesn't have solidity. I don't know how else to describe it. But when I picked this one up, it feels super wobbly. Like it doesn't even feel like the spine is straight. Like it feels like there's a twist to it every time I handle it. So that's the first thing I notice. The paper doesn't feel all that different to me. The cover boards don't feel all that different to me. Let's take a look. The wobbliness makes me suspicious. I mean, I guess it could be a new bad printer too, but the wobbliness makes me suspicious. I mean, the printing looks fine. There's a little bit of show on white page. Okay, so here's the thing. So here's the spread. It's on page 240 if you want to play along at home, because we'll be doing this in the other book too. And on the spread, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a lot of white here in this test tube or whatever this is. And the white has some black on it. I don't know if you can see this. It looks a little gritty. And I assumed that it was show from the other side of the page. But the other side of the page, it's got some black, but there's a word balloon right there where I'm getting the black show through. I can even see the word balloon, right? So where is this coming from? I think it's coming from this side of the page. I think that we're getting rub from one side of the page on the other side of the page. Now, unless you have really oily hands, which is a thing, no discrimination against that here, but unless you have really, really oily hands, you should be able to touch the black in a book and it should not come off on your hand. And that's the quality of the printing, the quality of the ink, and the quality of the paper, right? Paper grabs color. It's a sponge for color, really. And that's why it's hard to like write on something slick or shiny with a Sharpie, because nothing about that thing that is coated is absorbing the ink from that Sharpie. And so the Sharpie can't put a stain on it as opposed to a Sharpie on your couch, which is very absorbent, right? So I'm going to set this one down, open on that page 240. I'm going to open this one to 240. And see if it has a similar problem. No, it doesn't. Here's 240. The printing looks pretty... Actually, the printing doesn't look very similar at all. I'm going to come back to that for a second. It's got the same page in the back, but it doesn't have rub. Now, that could just be a sign of a book that's been in my collection for a while, which maybe is giving it away. But we can pull a lot of epics off the shelf. I'm hard-pressed to think of any Marvel book where I didn't have show on the page, but I actually had ink rub from a facing page. That's a little weird. That's not something that happens a lot. And here's the other thing. Look really closely, if you will, at this red car. It's very well defined on this page. It has specific black lines which divide up the car. You can see them in the grille of the car. And it's different than Wanda's costume because the black is actually part of the feature of the car in addition to lining the edge. Whereas Wanda's costume is red. It has black lines from inking, but there's no black part of Wanda's costume. So the edge of the black around her mask is just a little bit of shadow. But now let's look at this other book. The printing in this book is just not really well aligned. If you look at this page, the car actually has a white highlight. The black is not quite hitting the mark there or there. And on Wanda's face, there's actually some white highlight where some of the black lines are. I don't know if you can see that. Now, in printing, that's called a registration problem. So if you've ever seen a big uncut sheet of paper that's been printed somewhere professionally or at the edge of a poster or something, sometimes you'll see those little color lines along the top of it that are like all the different colors, CMYK of the printer, or there's like a little circle that has the 4 colors, and then there's like a little hatch mark. What that is, it's a way to show that all of the printer heads are registered to each other. So things are not, the black is shooting out over here and then the red is shooting out a little bit over from where it's supposed to be shooting over the black. This happens on our home printers all the time too, right? You can see it if you try to pull out a page early, which I'm not recommending, but you can see how some of the ink has gone down accurately and some of it hasn't. Now, professional printing presses, they have a vested interest in getting registration right. But guess what? Registration problems happen everywhere. It's even the best, nicest, most expensive printer can print out a page with a registration problem because it's just about how one page goes through the printer. And you will see this sometimes in books where you'll see a page where it looks like the black in the word balloon doesn't quite line up, or it's got like a little shadow to itself, and that's a registration problem. And you can return that book to the person that you bought it from, maybe, but that's not a printing error that happens across a whole print run usually. If you find 10 other people with that book and that page in that book, not one of them might have that same problem because it might have literally just been a registration error with that one page. So this is just a registration error, but to have that registration error be with the blacks, and for the blacks on that page to be facing another page where there's rub, it's starting to make me look at this a little bit more closely and say, what else is going on? But there's some pages here with really delicate black. Here, you probably can't even see this on the video resolution, but that is not a shaded gray. It's actually very, very fine lines. You probably can see it up close there. And they're reproduced with great fidelity. So if I had to guess, I would say that this is the quad graphics book, and the other one's the newer book. Not just because of the registration issue with the color, but also because of this spine. I can also, there's like a crinkle in the application of the paper on the cover. Now this has got a little bit of a seal. You ever get a book where like the edge is coming up a little bit and there's almost like a little bit of cellophane? There's a seal on this cover board. On the inside, there's not. That's why it just feels like normal cardboard on the inside. But that's got to get applied in an even way, or else it creates bubbles, or there's parts that pull away. And there's like a little bubble or imperfection on the spine. Now again, that bubble can happen almost anywhere. But actually, now that I'm looking down the whole spine, there's like I almost could like rub my hand across the spine. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this and feel the texture of that cover. Now, to be fair, let's pick out another epic that I know that I've had for like a pretty long time. Maybe like the first Iron Man epic, right? Because all the first epics are pretty old. I have no idea where this is printed. But this is like smooth. It's so smooth. This is one of the ones I've had the longest. There's nothing about it that's not totally perfect. And also, this spine is solid as heck. It's solid as we would say here in New Zealand. There's like no wiggle, no give. This is clearly one of the, and first of all, the paper, I could commit an assassination with the paper. So anyway, there's your comparison, right? So I'm thinking this one has to be the worst book. When I pick up the one that I think is better and look at the spine, I mean, it's got like a little ding on it because I think I actually just gave it a little ding as I was picking it up before the episode. Oops. But it doesn't have that quality of unevenness on the spine. It's nice and glossy. There you can see the little ding I gave it right there. So I'm going to say this first one is the quad graphics. I'm going to put it on top on my pile here. Before we reveal the answer, I want to talk a little bit about this book. So I haven't even said explicitly what it is. It is Avengers West Coast Epic Collection Volume 1. It goes from 1984 to 1986. It contains West Coast Avengers 1 through 4, Iron Man Annual 7, Avengers 250, West Coast Avengers 1 through 7, Vision and the Scarlet Witch 1 and 2, Wonder Man 1, and actually a bunch of material from other stories I discovered as I was looking through this. Excerpts from Avengers 239, 243, 244, 246, to give some context. And this is something that's been collected a lot. So West Coast Avengers started out with a number of Marvel Premier Classic hardcover collections. They then upgraded it to Omnibus, which I have in my other shelf in my other room. And now we also have it in Epic Collection. So we've seen it in a few different formats. But something that I really was struck upon as I was looking through it and remembering, because I've read some of this material before, is just how casual the assembly of the West Coast Avengers is. That first miniseries, it's on the heels of Hawkeye's own miniseries, and Hawkeye basically assembles some folks on the West Coast, and he says to them, so there can only be 6 Avengers on the official Avengers squad, but then I was thinking, why can't there be another Avengers squad? And they wind up having a big fight. They fight the Blank, and they have to, turns out he's being manipulated by Gravitron. There's all this stuff that happens. But at its core, it's kind of just about Hawkeye being like, there's so many heroes, and we could do more good if there would just be more of us. And so I actually had to ask permission to have another group of us, to have another headquarters, to be salaried, and for us to even be Avengers. It's kind of bureaucratic in nature, but it also opens up this idea that the West Coast Avengers, it's like a looser Avengers. They're on the West Coast. At one point, Rhodey makes this great comment. He's Iron Man in this period. Oh, I opened it up right to it. Whew, I thought nothing on Earth would impress me anymore, but I was wrong. That building's 2 miles long if it's an inch. Silicon Valley is a lot different from the South Philly neighborhood where I grew up, but it seems like a good place to make a new start. Which is hilarious to me because I, too, grew up in a South and Southwest Philly neighborhood, and I, too, actually joined a software as service venture-backed company where I had to go to Silicon Valley and present things. And it's a crazy feeling for a kid from South Philly, so I really sympathized with Rhodey in that moment. And of course, he has got other things beyond that he was, Tony Stark's bodyguard and then got upgraded to Iron Man. Also, not to just keep bragging, this is the one on the top still, not to keep bragging on it, but look what happens when I give it a little squeeze here. It's just like the whole book just like indents or like collapses right along the spine. So I think enough drama. I'm going to open this up. I think this is the quad. I'm going to feel real silly if it's not. Manufactured between August and September 2018 by Quad Graphics. There you go. And just for comparison, this Iron Man one that's in amazing condition was manufactured in 2014 by R.R. Donnelly in Salem, Virginia. So this book is 4 years older, and it is like so solid. The pages could be used as murder weapons. The spine is so square. Marvel, what are you doing? And the cover price at this time was $34. In 2018, the cover price was $39, and today, still $39. With this brand new copy. This new copy, I bet it's going to be either from Fry or Salisco. Manufactured between November and December by Fry Communications. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this book is the best thing on earth. We saw me say that I actually feel like the cover boards feel kind of flimsy to me. But it's got a nice square binding. It's well adhered. There's no obvious printing errors, although they can happen to anybody. I did see a page in there that was kind of muddy. And like, when you see a muddy page, was it muddy in the original inks? Is the restoration muddy? Or did the paper come out muddy? It's hard to know. Like this Tigra, this is not great. I mean, she's kind of just like a blob if you look at the black ink on her body. And it's like, is that just bad inking, bad restoration? We'll never know. Unless we go and look at like a digital version of it, I guess. So I do this for a few reasons. One is, I think it's important that we focus on spending money on the things that we want in our collection. And if there's things where the quality is not exciting to us, why are we putting it in our collection, right? Marvel has proven especially that all this stuff will get reprinted again in some other format. You do not have to buy a book and bite the bullet. I remember at one point in 2011, when I was just buying every single book as it came out, trying to catch up, Marvel put out this book. It was like Prelude to Age of Apocalypse. And I bought it because that was a gap in the X-Men, and I had these X-Men guides. And it got to my house, and it was on newsprint paper for some reason. And not only was it on newsprint, even though it wasn't like an essential edition, it was just a brand new color book, but those original issues were on glossy paper. I still had them. So I was like, this is a violation of the contract, not physical, but like the mental contract I have with Marvel, that they're going to provide me with stuff of a consistent quality. And so I returned it. And I would say that same thing to you today. Like, don't feel like you're stuck buying books that are not pleasing to have or pleasing to hold. You're in control of if you buy the book or not. I know it's hard because we're at distance in the internet. We can't look at the front cover and feel it and touch it. But don't buy things grudgingly. It's your life. It's finite. It's your money. It's finite. And so that's one message. But then the other message I wanted to send, and I think this book did a great job of proving it, is a lot of this stuff is arbitrary. Like even me, I've been on press so many times. I have printed out hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pieces of color offset printing work in a past career. even for me, I can't always tell the difference between the papers. And even for me, just because I see a bad registration in one book, it doesn't mean that that whole book is bad or substandard. Even for me, who's somebody who kind of knows what I'm talking about, these things are subjective. So just because you get one book that has a wobbly binding, just because you get one book where the paper shows through a little bit, or it seems like there's a little bit of an ink stain on a facing page, although I do not see that very often, it does not mean that you A, are suddenly an expert in printing, neither am I, or B, it doesn't mean that that printer is just terrible or whatever. There, in a print run of thousands of books, there is surely the worst book in that print run that came off the worst from the print run, and there is no QC person, having previously done QC at a printer, there is no QC person looking through every single book off that printer. Now I just have to know if this Tiger page looks as bad on the other one. At best, you might proof 1%, 3%, maybe for a somewhat small print run, 10%. But even in a 10% proof, yep, that's just the art. It's not the printing. The art is just got those muddy lines. Even at a 10% QC, you're not reading every book. You're being like, okay, I'm going to check, and this is real. This is how I used to do QC on press. You come with a list of like the critical things. Is the indicia right? Does the registration look good on page 5, 15, 25, 50, and 2 randomly selected pages? How do the reds look in that full page splash of the car, right? You go in with 5 to 10 points of quality control. That's what QC means, quality control. And you do, or QA, quality assurance, and you check those points. You do not read every single book. You don't look at every single book. And for a print run that these have probably in the thousands, maybe low 10,000s. I'm not up in the most recent printing runs and how big they are in these books. Even if you looked at 10% and that was 1,000 books, there's still 9,000 books that you did not look at. So that's our very special Seeing Double episode of Haul Around the World, all about one book. And I actually have to say, I do recommend this West Coast Avengers run. It's fun. It's good Hawkeye material. First of all, like if you like Hawkeye and you like modern Hawkeye and you're like, who is this character? Why do people find him charming? Why do they keep writing him? To read this Hawkeye will start to communicate that to you. It's by Roger Stern, Bob Harris, Steve Englehart, Dave Michelini. And it just really gives you a sense of why that character is so beloved today. He's really different than the Hawkeye that you know from the MCU, if you know the MCU. So it's a fun Avengers, it's a lighter weight Avengers, it's a slightly more humorous Avengers, and it's Avengers that's not as anchored by that like A-list holy trinity kind of group of characters, even when it's outside the trinity. This manages to have some more fun and have some unexpected people on the team, and I think that is part of why West Coast Avengers is actually the Avengers book that I often like. So that's been another episode of Haul Around the World. Thanks for joining me for this special paper-focused experiment. I know it's not for everybody. Please continue to tune in as I continue to go through the haul. It was previously up to here, all the hauls that I hadn't gone through since last year. Maybe it's like down to chest height now. So it's almost enough that I can wade through it, but I still have a lot more boxes to get through. So please do continue to stay tuned here on Crushing Comics. And until the next time I see you, I hope that you are well. Wait, hi, hello, hi, I'm back. Look, I already took off my jacket, but I'm back. I know I said goodbye because I noticed one more thing and I just had to point it out. So this is the good one, right? Look at the spine. Seems fine, right? Seems pretty centered. What's going on with this face here on the side? Who is that? Oh, we could turn to the back and find out, because on this good new one, the cover is not totally aligned. Now, luckily, the spine itself is not bad. There's none of like the front cover that got pulled around to wrap onto the spine, but the back cover, the front clearly continues to the back, and a little bit of Tiger's face is wrapped around to the back. I looked at some other epics real quick to just see, is like this just a common thing? No, even on the bad one, the spine is actually pretty straight, and the front cover doesn't wrap onto the back cover. So again, it's all subjective. Every batch can come out different. I might have the only one from the whole run that is like that, and we'll never know unless you all go look at your own one as well. So I just wanted to give you a little epilogue to that, even if I was in the mid state of undress when I noticed it, that every book has the chance to be a badly built book.